Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Noxcast, your weekly news recap podcast. I'm your host, Nathan Hope. I'm the managing executive editor of the Equinox.
I'm Erno, the news editor.
Thanks for joining us once again. We are back from our 1 week hiatus where some of us went to Washington, D.C. for the College Media Association, Associated Collegiate Press, and Society of Professional Journalists Media Fest Conference, where the Equinox was finalist in 23 different awards for the College Media Association Pinnacles, many of which placed in honorable mention, but then also third place, second place, and some first place as well. So just another representation of the great work that our staff is all putting in every week. And the biggest news, I think, out of that conference was we placed our best ever in recent memory for Best in Show for website. So we submit our website for consideration. And there's two different categories. There's campuses with under 15,000 students and those with more than. We're obviously in the under 15,000 category, but we placed third. So we're officially on the podium. We got the bronze medal with that, if you will. So I was really happy about that. Some of the improvements that we made, we obviously introduced, for those of you who have read the Equinox for at least a year now, we introduced photo sliders, which is a massive improvement where you can have multiple photos attached to each article with like a seamless slider plugin. That was probably the biggest thing that we introduced, but we're always looking at ways to better improve our web experience. We know that it's so important nowadays, especially, and thank you to our webmaster, Charlotte, for continuing to steward that work. It's very important. On that note, I would also like to talk about some of our open positions. So recently, we did elect a new multimedia director, Noelle, who will be editing this podcast from now on, in addition to providing video coverage of different events and such. So stay tuned for that. We've already had a couple things that she's worked on up on our social media, which have been doing pretty well. But we have two open e-board positions at this time. Copy editor, which is a very important position, is someone who looks over our content on a weekly basis and looks at it on the Google Docs, as well as looking at the content on the paper layout before it gets printed. So people will come in on Tuesday night. The copy editors will come in on Tuesday nights, look at the content as it's on the paper, make any final edits before sending it off to print. And then the other part of it is looking at the docs throughout the week, just to make the edits on the docs, make them as good as possible beforehand. I was a copy editor before. It was a great position to have. It's very important to what we do. Obviously, we want as many eyes on things as possible. And we're very grateful to have a relatively new copy editor, Serena, on board. She's been doing great. But we have room for another. So reach out to nhope@ksequinox.com if you're interested, and I could talk to you about it. We have a job application link on the bottom of our website. The other position is business manager. So this is someone who sort of does more of like the paperwork side of things, assists our administrative executive editor with like buying supplies, merch, things like that. It's not a huge like responsibility position in terms of like the other roles, but it is also important in terms of just the orderly functioning of our newsroom on a week-to-week basis. So if you're business-minded at all, also reach out. And the same goes for that. The job application is on the bottom of our site. But yeah, just wanted to throw that out there for those who might be interested. With that, I'd like to get into our news recap proper. So our top story for news this week was a piece done by our staffer, Sam Menard, which was about the Pumpkin Fest, the annual big event in Keene that everyone knows about, everybody talks about. It's sort of like a harvest fest. It's a big celebration that has pumpkins lined up all across the downtown square. There's vendors from different businesses, nonprofits, schools, etc. There's different things you can go eat. There's like specialty items at local businesses. It's a fun time. It's a big deal for us. And so Sam got some good coverage of that while a lot of us were away. So we very much appreciate that. And then some great photos from our staffer Janet as well. So yeah, just all around great stuff. And I was happy to see this.
Yeah, and I remember my first thought when I was doing layout was that the photos came out so incredible. They're very vibrant and they're very beautiful, and I think it captured the event very well. And I think Sam did a really good job covering it too, talking to multiple different vendors, hearing their opinions while they're there. I think it was just all around very solid.
Yeah, it's sort of like a bounce back thing too. Obviously, people unfortunately do know Keene in somewhat of a bad light due to the Pumpkin Fest riots back in like 2014. But since then, after the festival was kind of shut down for some years, it got revived a couple of years ago, and it's been going ever since. So we obviously hope for the continued tradition and safety of the event and things like that. It's a huge deal for the community. So just the fact that we can consistently have it again and have it go off relatively without a hitch is just great news. But moving on to something a little bit more sort of serious and sort of continuing conversations again about effects of budget cuts. We have this piece that was published in the Sentinel, which was about the social host liaison position being cut here on campus. This is a position that is funded in part, in half by Keene State, in half by the city, and it was created back in 2020 when the social host ordinance was passed by Keene City Council. Basically, the idea behind the position is that this person would act as like an in-between for people who live in like off-campus houses, and there might be like parties that are hosted, making sure that there's safety there, making sure there's coordination between the campus and the police on safety issues, making sure people know resources for housing and things like that. We actually did a profile on the person who currently occupies this position last year. She had reached out to us and talked about wanting to connect more with the student body, make sure people know that she's there. This is like a part-time position, 20 hours a week. And it kind of is like it's like a partner position almost with like the Keene Police Office liaison, but that of course is an actual officer. This is someone who's not affiliated directly with the department. They are sort of more of an on-campus presence. So obviously, unfortunate news, and having seen that article that we did on her and seeing the fact that she wanted to be more in the community. And obviously, this won't take effect until another couple months, I believe. But it's just hard to see. And, these positions, there's no real right answer when you're trying to deal with budget cuts, and it's always going to have that impact. But I just feels a little bit hard when it's like trying to figure out, oh, this person doesn't interact with students as much as others, so people won't notice. It's like there's always going to be people that notice when people aren't on campus anymore, and when positions are cut, that's more work that's being put on other people. So not really great news.
Yeah, and I think just seeing all these reductions and cuts is really disheartening. I remember last year, one thing that we covered was that there's no longer a dietitian on campus with the dining team. And it just makes me question what's actually getting cut and if they're cutting the right things. Because some of these offices are being brought down to one person, and if that person leaves, we're not going to have any fallback plan.
Yeah, I mean, I am like, I can't imagine being put in the position where, the state deals out this is how much less money you're getting, and you have to get there somehow. You have to make up and see where you can find any cuts or efficiencies or whatever they might call it. It's already sort of running a tight ship beforehand. And, a lot of this very difficult work has already been done in years past. And you figure, coming from the college perspective, that you might be rewarded by the state by, oh, you found efficiencies already. You did the hard work, and now we're going to support you. And it's kind of been the polar opposite.
Yeah, it's just so disheartening seeing everything on campus right now with everything being cut. And I understand, of course, the position our college is in. It's very difficult to work through that. But I just feel that in some degrees, it's not the right areas being cut, and that they should try and invest more in trying to keep those areas in any degree that they can. But we'll see.
Yeah, but it's good reporting by the Sentinel's Sophia Kashmiri on this subject, and I encourage you to check out the article if you get the chance. Moving on to some more positive coverage or more upbeat coverage. This is some event coverage done by our staff for Dakota on the Family Day that was held on campus the same day as Pumpkin Fest, actually, where students' families get to sort of just come down or come up to campus and visit their student, walk around campus, see what's going on. They have like some events planned. I know a couple things talked about during the article was like the murder mystery dinner that they had, and there was cornhole, and there was other fun little things happening in addition to just giving families the opportunity if they want to go downtown, look at Pumpkin Fest. That was also sort of why they planned it on that day. But a nice little variety, talking to both parents and students alike and sort of getting their thoughts on the event. I feel like sometimes it might be more, I guess, like overlooked compared to the events that are like strictly student focused. But, it's important to also make sure that family feels somewhat included and knows what's going on campus to some degree, I think.
Yeah, and speaking from experience, I was here this past weekend, and my parents weren't able to come up, but my grandparents did. And it was their first time really getting to see Keaton's campus, and I felt like it was just a very positive atmosphere. I think everyone was really having fun, and I think having Pumpkin Fest there also like increased the turnout for sure. I think a lot of parents were very excited to bring their kids down there.
Yeah. So good stuff, good reporting, and I was happy to see that. Moving on to our editorial this week was a piece talking about news surrounding Don Burks. Plymouth State's president is now going to be taking over as interim president at Keene State, which is something that probably would have been hard to think of or imagine a couple years ago for those who have been around a little bit longer here at Keene State. The fact that there would sort of be that new partnership between schools that are traditionally, at least on athletics fields and stuff, considered rivals. But now maybe that's not as much the case because now we're going to be led by the same person, Don Burks. So in this editorial, we really stressed and talked about the fact that I think it's important to give any new leader a chance, new to us, I mean, a chance and to sort of demonstrate their ability to lead effectively. And obviously, we have some sort of faith in that. There seems to be so much support around this approach. And, although I don't know if I personally am 100% on board with this, given some of the other options that were on the table, I think it might have been one of the better ones. And I do think that there is something to be said about having someone in this position, at least as a temporary fix, someone who's dealt with the state legislature before, who knows the mechanics of the university system, who is their job, already is to support a regional college in New Hampshire. We're both regional colleges. There's good and bad to it, and I think we sort of just talked about there's always that certain level of uncertainty again. There's that level of just what really is going to happen. How much is Don Burke's going to be on campus? How much is he going to interact with students? Obviously, with a lot of those things, you probably won't see him on campus to the same extent as President Treadwell, unfortunately, because they'll be sharing time between the two. But, how much decision making will be deferred to on-campus officers in the cabinet, like the provost and the vice president for finance. There's just a lot of questions, and I feel like, as always, we advocate for transparency and clarity in terms of what the plans are on that. And, we're going to continue covering it as closely as we can because a lot of people do have thoughts and concerns and feelings about what this means. And, it's sort of, we're in uncharted territory, really.
Yeah, and I got a chance to talk to Donald Burks yesterday, and I think being able to talk to him definitely made me feel a lot better about the changes. He's worked with Melinda for around 8 years now. They consider themselves close friends, close comrades, and they've worked together to try and work through the system changes that we've all been experiencing in the last year. And I think that his past experience with 4 different universities will definitely help as well. He's someone who's very experienced in this field. And I think that while I'm sad to see Treadwell go, and while I wish that we had a singular president on campus who can be present all the time, I think this is a very good solution for right now and for the next year.
Yeah, it's just sort of, I think a lot of people, do have that feeling where they do want to be immediately dismissive of just such a massive shift in how things are done administratively. But it really comes down to that or the other options, which either aren't possible or wouldn't be as feasible or just looked at more as positively because everybody always talks about how much they would not like UNH branch campuses. Everyone has concerns, or knows that merging with the community college system in New Hampshire and university system isn't really going to happen in the near future due to the fact that the community college system, is viewed on more favorably by the state, and this is all talked about plenty of times by the board of trustees, by President Treadwell. This isn't anything super new in the past few weeks, but just it's there's not really a great way out of it, and this is kind of just it buys a year in terms of you have someone who is a little bit more just experienced and has the ability to understand Keene State's position. And a lot of some of, or as President Treadwell has said, a lot of the decisions that will be made regarding budget cuts and such are things that she has already put into like place as like plans, her and her cabinet. So it's not like uh, President Burks will come in and immediately cut, and he's going to be the one making those decisions. It will have been President Treadwell's plan, and so there's just a lot to, I guess, be proven, and a lot of just people who would like to see President Burks visible on campus, transparent, things like that. All the great qualities that President Treadwell had when she was president of Keene State.
And I think that it's someone who Treadwell knows personally and who has a lot of faith in taking up the role. Definitely gives me a bit more confidence in going forward with this plan. I do worry for Keene's independency within the system and how this might be merging us into it. But I feel like, at least for the next year, that this was one of the best outcomes we could have hoped for.
Yeah, I mean, I did also want to give a little bit of background because we did. Chloe wrote the breaking news piece when the email came out announcing that Burks would serve as interim president. And one of the things with Noxcast we always want to do is sort of peel back that curtain a little bit in terms of like, well, what did that look like? Breaking news is always one of those things that's like it happens so quick, and you're just in the moment. But the email came out on a Friday, I believe, and that was the Friday where a lot of us were in Washington D.C. For the conference, and I was sat at a table with Webmaster Charlotte, Administrative Executive Editor Tim, and our advisor Dr. Lawfer, and we were at a Moroccan and Mediterranean buffet, and just opened my phone, and then there's an email saying Plymouth State's president is going to be the interim president of Keene State, and you're just in the middle of eating, and it's what are you gonna do? So that was sort of just when I was like panicked, kind of just like I texted you. I was like, we got to get something out like right now on this, and so we finished up pretty quickly. Went back to the hotel. We like copied it at the same time, and then got it up. Fortunately, I had to call the editor-in-chief of the Plymouth State's The Clock to get like a contributed photo. It was a crazy time, but it's like things like that, which like it just happens so fast, and it's really exciting experience, and it's really kind of like nerve-wracking too. I don't know if you want to talk about just like writing it, what that was like.
No, I definitely agree. I was very surprised. I was in the middle of doing homework when the text came in, and I was actually like 5 minutes away from a meeting with one of my teachers. So I was in a Zoom call with them while I was writing up the breaking news piece. I was like switching between tabs, and it was definitely an experience, but I think it was a good one, and just a good experience to have going forward, know how to do it.
Yeah, there's all those mechanics too, with just the fact that we are all students who also have obligations when it comes to like homework and classwork and things like that. So a lot of the times it's just trying to find some balance while also meeting the expectation that people see an email like that come out, and people do expect that we'll have something out lightning fast, and we try our best, and I think we got that up within like an hour and a half after the email came out, which isn't too bad, I think. But we will have some more in-depth coverage coming out pretty soon about the situation revolving around Burks, and some final coverage about President Treadwell's departure. But with that being said, let's move on to A&E, which is a story that you did, Chloe, about the Einbeck Exchange concert, which is a pretty big deal for the music department. Keene has like a partner city agreement with Einbeck, Germany. So each year they sort of like alternate, is my understanding, where one year they send their singers over here, and then there's like a collaborative performance, and then another year we send our folks over to Germany. But it's really, yeah, it's just a big event, just community wise. It's the seventh annual, I believe, and a lot of folks in the community came out to support it. And yeah,
I mean, covering the concert, it was very last minute, but it was a really fun experience. I think I was in the balcony seating, and the music itself was absolutely beautiful. And I think it was very nice to hear a variety of music, both in English and in German, and it was just very vibrant, and I could tell that the crowd was very into it as well. Both gentlemen that I got to speak to after the performance were very well versed on the topic, Minister of Music at Jaffrey. And yeah, I think it was just really fun. I'm glad I got to go, and I'm glad I got to talk to audience members who also enjoyed it. But I definitely encourage anyone to go to it in the next few years.
yeah. I mean, another instance where it's like right on the way back, like the train back from DC to Brattleboro, Vermont, and then we have to sort of be like, who are we going to get to go there since we're all on a train, and that's not going to happen because we arrived like an hour. It would have been like an hour into the performance. It would just wouldn't have happened, and it's like, we have one thing per year. Can we just have everything go smoothly? But the reality of the situation is sometimes things get, thrown together last minute, but we still get some strong coverage. I think it turned out to be, a good article, and glad you were able to get a photo as well. But, things like that, it's the reality of what happens. And, I think our job is also to be somewhat, candid about like, things aren't always, oh, we all planned it out, this everything went perfectly. No. But so, um I think, it's just I'm glad we got to get that coverage, and I think, having collaborative performances and having such a strong agreement with like an international partner, especially at a time like this, is really important. So I'm glad that that's just continuing and flourishing over in the music sphere. Lastly, we're going to move into sports. And so we have a preview of the season for both men's and women's swim and dive. Women's swim and dive were LEC champions last year, so top of the top over there. I know that they had like a streak going for a while. I think there was one year where they didn't get it. So I forget the exact number, but they've been really strong team for a really long time. Men's isn't too far behind. They finished, I believe, fourth in the conference championship last year. So two very strong teams who are just looking to build off of previous success, also welcoming in new swimmers and divers, and trying to make sure that they can continue to see that success. And I know it's sort of like we're our sports teams are at such like different places sometimes, where it's like, other people are going to the season, they might be a little bit unmotivated, or they might have to work to find that like motivation to be like, oh well, last year we didn't do as well, and so now it's like we have to prove ourselves. And then other teams, it's like, well, we did kind of prove ourselves, but now it's like we have such a high bar of expectation in terms of like quality. So regardless of the place that teams are in, obviously we wish them the best, but it's good to get that commentary and to like understand how our student athletes are feeling going to the season, how the coaches are feeling with the group of people that they got, because success is never granted. It's earned, and I feel like our teams work as hard as they can, regardless of the past and historically. Um, it's about putting your best foot forward, and I think that's what you heard from a lot of people in this piece that our sports editor Jacob did.
Yeah, and I think this year especially, we've been seeing our sports teams really flourish and come into their own. And I think that's a great thing, especially with D3 athletes. They don't always get the recognition they deserve. And so I think it's nice to just focus on the specific teams, focus on the new players, and just get their perspective on everything.
Yeah, definitely. And we had some also good coverage about some of the fight to get to the LEC with men's and women's soccer, done by our staffer Matt, and some other just great pieces in the sports section as well. So I encourage you to check those out too. But with that being said, we've reached the end of our recap. So as always, I would like to extend a special thank you to the composer of the music for Noxcast, our very own Equinox alum, Zach Keenan. as well as the creator of the graphic for Noxcast, our very own art director, Elijah Fisher, and now the editor of Noxcast, Noel Hisjin. So, thank you for tuning in, and we will see you next week for another recap. Bye-bye.